Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. It is Friday, so we have a KSA, and I am solo. And if you don't know why I'm solo, then maybe you didn't watch our most recent episode. And if you didn't watch our most recent episode, there are major spoilers, like seriously big spoilers in this. So I would strongly encourage you to go watch that first, and then come and hear some behind-the-screen thoughts on what happened in the episode, how I got us to that point, how the players got us to that point, and how things might have been different. So that's your spoiler warning. We've got a bunch of questions from our viewers. And so I'm going to start us off with those, and then I'll dive into some behind the screen stuff in case you are a viewer, you're up to date, and you don't want to hear behind the screen stuff. You just want to enjoy without commentary. So, questions first. Emily asks, who was evacuated and who stayed at the school? Thora mentioned trying to get Ezri and Arlo out, but not herself. And Malcolm also has issues with Ezri from Ezri's time with the strike force. I'm totally not just trying to gauge whether or not Thora is alive. I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer most of that question. You will find out how things went with the evacuation and the consequences of that now that the team have met up with the grown-up Rebel Warren gang. So have a little patience, and you will find answers to all of those questions. The one I will address is the implied suggestion that Malcolm's anger at the way that the strike force spoke to him and the way that the strike force damaged his ship and endangered himself and briefly killed his dear companion would cause him to just leave people to die in a crisis. Malcolm would be offended if he were here. I'm just saying. Malcolm would not do that. Malcolm is a better person than that. Whatever his private dislike of any characters is, Malcolm is not the kind of person who's going to abandon people to their death because he doesn't like them much. Emily also asks, was the strike force being transported to the new age of Kulsir originally a last-ditch plan for if there was a TPK? No. I have occasionally plotted what I would do in the event of a genuine TPK. I'm usually not in favor of TPKs unless it's a good narrative moment for it. Villains have other options than to kill characters, just as characters have other options than to kill villains when they take them down. Sometimes the dice just do that to you, or sometimes you're fighting something that wouldn't allow it. But I generally try to avoid a TPK if I can, unless it's good narrative moment. So I didn't, but I had made a few plans, and one of them did, of course, involve jumping forward and seeing the world like this, and the characters playing the resistance, essentially. But most of the time, I imagined that they would pick up characters in the current timeline for them in Stormreach as they know it, and continue the story that way, possibly as one of the kids or something like that would have been my inclination as to what to do then instead. So no, it was not originally a TPK backdoor or a backup plan. Emily asks, was there anything the strike force could have done to ensure that they would be sent to the past instead of the future? Yes. Yes, I will admit I was excited for this to happen. I've wanted to do some time travel shenanigans, but I really try to avoid railroading. And so I didn't just guarantee that this would result in them going to the future. I did have a way it could have gone the way they intended, but it would have almost certainly resulted in one of them either dying or being left behind. Essentially, the reason it went forward instead of back is that Kolsir was able to come in and attack the ship and do damage to the ship, so that Harazi basically told them to go before things were all the way ready, before the time was right, before the machine had fully warmed up, and so uh, the ship went half cocked, as it were, and so went the wrong way. If the crew or some portion of the strike force had chosen to help Harazi slow down Kolsir and his minions, they could have made it work. Could they have done that without almost certainly leaving one of the player characters behind? I think probably not. So that's my answer. Yes, it was possible, but it would have come at a terrible cost. And I don't know if it ever. I suspect it occurred to Colin to do that, because one of the last things Colin says that he did is he summoned his echo next to the door, and so my read on that was that he was prepared to swap places with the echo, but the echo was destroyed before he had the chance to do that. I don't know if that's true. I'll have to ask Colin if that was what his plan was. But that was what I thought he was going to do, is that he would swap places, and I was ready for him to do that. He had the echo attack instead, which drew attention and caused the echo to be destroyed. But that's kind of what I thought that might be. So had they done that, yes, it would be possible that some portion of the strike force would have made it to the past. That would have been an interesting position, because I would have kind of needed someone I'm not sure what I would have done for the third player in that circumstance. I would have had to kind of figure that out pretty quick, I think. But that's that would have been the way to make sure that it worked the way they intended it to work. And how long does it take before a soul in Dollar cannot be contacted by contact other plane? Exploring Eberron implies that it takes about 6 days for shades to lose their memories and pass into whatever, if anything, is beyond Dollar. But I wanted to hear your take on it. Honestly, my take is I wouldn't let you contact a dead person with contact other plane. My read is that contact other plane is for contacting what used to be called outsiders, creatures that are not native to the material plane. A soul, even though it's now in Duller, is originally native to the material plane. And as such, I would not consider it a valid target for contact other plane. There are, I suppose, theoretically there are other ways of talking to a soul. But I wouldn't allow contact other plane for that purpose. If someone tried to, I would probably have it instead contact some agent of an important entity in Dollar, the Keeper, or some other being. That would be what I would do with that instead. But to your question, how long does it take? I guess I would go with exploring Eberron. I've never needed to ask that question. It's an interesting one. 6 days seems short. I wonder if that's 6 days in Dollar or 6 days in the material plane, and what the difference is. That seems quick, but and would seem like it would have implications for resurrection magic. Oof, think about that. Mia asks, were you always planning to send the gang forward in time, or did that come as a result of player choice? Once I figured out what was going on with Harazi and we introduced time travel as a possibility, I really wanted to do an homage to Days of Future Past and Age of Apocalypse and other classic X-Men time travel hijinks. But I didn't want to force it. So it was totally possible for this to not happen. And I'm confident it probably would have taken longer, but I'm confident the players could have found some way to do something against Kolsir. But it probably would have required essentially getting who they could and evacuating Stormreach, as Thora intended to. And trying to carry the battle back to Kulsir after he had taken the city. And that's kind of what I think would probably have had to happen for them to avoid the time travel thing. But yeah, I wanted some time travel shenanigans. I was ready for them to go back if they made choices that allowed them to go back in time instead. But this was what I hoped would happen. It allows me to do a lot of fun things that I think will be really cool as an element of story. It has allowed me to do a lot of fun things as an element of story because we're 3 or 4 episodes ahead of you guys at this point. So yeah, I'm glad this worked out. This is what I wanted to happen. Okay, so that's all of our questions. So if you don't want any commentary on how I sort of worked on this, then you can mute this and let it play out for the sake of the metrics, please. But you don't have to watch it anymore. I'm just kidding. Do what you want. So my evil scheme for Kulsir worked like this. Eric was partly right in what Kulsir wanted to do. My evil plan for Kulsir went like this. Kulsir woke up and he began gathering artifacts related to him. I'm not going to get into the why and what of that because it's relevant still to the end game of the story. But he began gathering artifacts relevant to him. We saw some of that. Some of it he sent his heralds around. Some of it he went himself. But he's been gathering artifacts of power. And each time he's gotten one, he's become more powerful. It might have seemed like a really bad idea for the Strike Force to go straight at him earlier, but potentially he was weaker earlier. So it's it's a trade-off. They were less ready. He was less ready. But he's been gathering artifacts, gathering power. Once he learned about Shade, presumably from Tommel, he began wanting to acquire Shade so that he could find Harazi. Because his goal was capture Harazi's lair and then have access to her time travel technology, which would allow him potentially to go back and fix the mistake that allowed him to fall. So that would be his overall goal. How we got to where we got, and I tried again very hard not to railroad things, is he successfully gathered many things. He gathered various artifacts related to himself. He was able to gather the body of Cardane and bring Cardane back and modify his memories. And when Mirren captured Shade as a target of opportunity, she was interrupted before she could force Shade to show her all the way to Harazi's lair, but she did figure out Shaytirias Talai, and she was able to take some of Shade's fur for the purposes of spells like scrying. This meant that Kulsir could put eyes on Shaytirias Talai, as well as on Shade, and watch for her to go to Harazi. And so once he failed to get Shade herself, or to get the information straight out of Shade's head, his goal then was to get Shade to take him to Harazi. And it's heartbreaking because Casey totally guessed that that's kind of what was that he might do that. And it, in fact, is what happened. She went, and this allowed his spies in the area to alert him, at which point he could teleport himself and his force to Shade, to where Shade was. Kulsir has access to a lot of spells, including Scry. He has access and teleportation and things like that. He also has access to versions of those spells that are not available to magic casters in modern Eberron. Eberron is an unusual world, although not an unusual fantasy, in that the giant civilization was technologically superior to modern civilization. Modern civilization is only just now starting to catch up to the giants. So the spells and magic tech of Eberron are mostly inspired by artifacts found by the giants, technologies created by the giants, or have been rediscovered, as technology tends to be. Um, and so he has access to magic that is like what a high level player character might have, but often slightly different, often slightly better version of that magic. So he's able to do these things. And I kind of set those conditions. He was waiting for Shade to go there, at which point he would follow with force and try to take the ship. Now, by doing what Harazi said and going instead of waiting or trying to protect her, the crew denied him that opportunity. They took the necessary components. They took the ship, and so Kulsir does not have access to a time machine. Does not have the ability to try and go back and fix the events that led to the fall of the Dominion. And so, in a lot of ways, just by going, Ari and Shade and Pog saved the world in some ways. Now, of course, they're stuck with a different sort of situation to save the world. Shave the world? I guess. So, yes, that's kind of where the evil scheme went from. That's how my villainous plot went. I worked that out a while ago in an outline of Kulsir's plan, and have been steadily working toward it. Each time I've had Kulsir interrupt whatever the party was doing, it's been to carry out the next step of that plan. And so that's how we've been progressing along for the last long while at this point. So yeah, that's how Kulsir got to this point, and that's what's been going on behind the screen. My last little bit here before I call it for this one is about time travel. Time travel is just full of contradiction. Time travel to the future is less full of contradiction than time travel to the past, but it's just full of contradiction. My advice, if you want to time travel, because if you're playing with a Sphinx, you've got that capacity. My advice, if you want to do time travel, is just make up how it works. Don't try to logic it. If you want to go with multiple timelines, that's certainly the neatest version of time travel, is multiple universes. If you don't want to do that, then I advise you just make up the rules. Just decide what works and what doesn't, and it works that way because it works that way and not because of anything else. That is what I will be doing. So if you notice that I'm ignoring some time travel paradoxes at any point, should they come up again, future time travel doesn't run into those things quite as badly. But if you think I'm ignoring time travel paradoxes, you're probably right. Because in my world of Eberron, nobody really knows how time travel is possible. It is something that the Sphinxes are technologically capable of doing, but no one really understands the science. Maybe not even the Sphinxes, or maybe Sphinx-like, they're just not telling anyone. So that's my advice for running time travel in your game. If you want to, is just decide what the rules are. Don't try to make them logical. And if the players have a problem with that, then maybe they just need to get into the magic of it all. So anyhow, thank you all so much for these questions. I hope you've enjoyed this. It does not stop being wild as we go forward. There will be a new episode of Khyber Shards this Monday. I hope you will join us for it. You will get an opportunity to find out a lot about what's been going on since the Strike Force left Stormreach in their time. In the meantime, though, you can get in touch with us in comments down below, as well as at various links in the description, including to our Discord. And until Monday, thanks for rolling with us.